Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Thomas was in the kitchen of his suburban home, carefully seasoning the salmon fillets he'd bought that morning at the organic market. The fish had to be perfect. This wasn't just any dinner, it was the exact menu from his first date with Vanessa 11 years earlier, when she'd laughed and confessed she'd never tried grilled salmon with Sicilian lemon and fresh herbs. Thomas remembered every detail of that night: the navy blue dress she'd worn, the way her eyes had sparkled when he admitted he'd watched 3 YouTube videos to learn how to make the dish, the way she'd run her fingers through his hair and said he was different from every man she'd ever met. He glanced at the wall clock. 4:40. Vanessa should be home around 6, as she always was on Fridays. Thomas had planned everything meticulously over the past few weeks. He'd bought lavender-scented candles, had the linen tablecloth she loved dry-cleaned, and even ordered a bouquet of white peonies, the flowers she'd said reminded her of their wedding. The table was already set on the back patio, with a view of the small garden he tended himself on weekends. His phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Thomas dried his hands and picked it up, maybe expecting a sweet message from Vanessa about their anniversary. The screen showed a text from her: "Babe, I'm so sorry, but I won't make it home for dinner. Big client demanding a last-minute meeting. Important event in 2 weeks and they want everything adjusted today. I'll be at the office late. Sorry. I promise I'll make it up to you tomorrow." Thomas read the message twice. He felt something strange tighten in his chest, a feeling that had become all too familiar over the past few weeks. It wasn't just disappointment. It was something deeper, more unsettling. Vanessa had been changing. Small details that, on their own, might have been coincidence, but together formed a troubling pattern. 3 weeks earlier, Thomas had been using the couple's shared computer to print out class materials when he noticed the iCloud account was still synced. It wasn't spying, he hadn't been looking for anything. But when he opened the Documents folder to save a file, he saw deleted messages that had reappeared through automatic syncing. Messages between Vanessa and Nathan, the freelance photographer she always hired for corporate events. The oldest messages dated back nearly 10 months, starting out professional, but growing far too intimate as the dates progressed. "You understand me in a way no one else does. Last night was incredible, I can't stop thinking about you. I need to see you again, Nathan." When? Thomas had frozen in his chair, rereading those lines until the words lost all meaning. His first instinct was to confront Vanessa immediately, but something held him back. A rational voice in the back of his mind whispered that he needed to be sure, needed to understand the full extent of what was happening. Over the next few days, he observed everything with renewed attention. The phone calls she took in another room, always lowering her voice. The times she smiled at her phone screen and quickly locked it when he approached. The solo work trips that had suddenly become more frequent. There was also the incident 6 months ago. Vanessa had come home pale one night, saying she wasn't feeling well. The next day, she mentioned needing to deal with a feminine health issue and that she'd be having a simple procedure. Thomas offered to go with her, but she refused, saying her sister had already volunteered. He remembered seeing a pregnancy test box in the bathroom trash a few days earlier, but when he asked, Vanessa said it had just been a scare and came back negative. After the procedure, Vanessa grew distant for weeks, sinking into a silence she blamed on work stress. Thomas had tried to reconnect, but she always found an excuse. Now, looking back with the cruel clarity of suspicion, he wondered if that test had really been negative, or if that health issue had been something far more painful and deliberate. Thomas looked at the seasoned salmon, the set table on the patio, the candles that would never be lit. A decision formed in his mind. He wasn't going to let that dinner go to waste. He wasn't going to spend their wedding anniversary alone while she made up excuses. If Vanessa was truly working late, he'd deliver the surprise he'd planned, he'd bring dinner to her office. And if she wasn't actually working, well, he'd finally get the confirmation he already knew, deep down, was coming. 20 minutes later, Thomas was packing the still-warm salmon fillets into thermal containers, arranging cloth napkins and cutlery into a wicker basket, and grabbing the chilled bottle of Chardonnay. He locked up the house and drove the familiar route to the business district where Vanessa worked as a senior coordinator for a corporate events company. Traffic was light for a Friday. Thomas drove on autopilot, his mind circling through memories. He remembered the first time he'd met Nathan, 2 years ago at the Christmas party they'd hosted at home. Vanessa had introduced the photographer as an incredible talent who's revolutionizing event photography. Nathan was younger, maybe in his early 30s, with that easygoing charm that came naturally to men in creative fields. He'd complimented their house, talked to Thomas about historic architecture, a subject Thomas loved, and even snapped spontaneous photos of the party that he later sent to them for free. Thomas had liked him. Thought he was a nice guy. Now, that Christmas memory felt tainted. How many other times had Nathan been in their home? How many times had he and Vanessa exchanged glances that Thomas, confident and oblivious, had never noticed? The office building came into view. Thomas parked and picked up the dinner basket. The lobby was empty, the night security guard gave him a distracted wave as he walked in. He knew the way, he'd come to pick up Vanessa before when her car was in the shop. He took the elevator up to the 5th floor, where the events company was located. The doors opened onto a dark, silent hallway. Most offices had their lights off, only the emergency exit signs cast a greenish glow on the walls. Thomas walked slowly, his footsteps muffled by the industrial carpet. As he approached Vanessa's office, he noticed a soft light spilling from under the door. It was slightly ajar, just a sliver. Thomas stopped a few feet away. He could hear faint music playing inside. He recognized the melody instantly, "The Night We Met" by Lord Huron, the same song that had played when he proposed to Vanessa, the one they danced to at their wedding, the one that was on their special playlist. He crept closer, his heart pounding so hard he felt the whole building could hear it. Through the crack in the door, he first saw the candles, small votives scattered across the conference table, creating an intimate, romantic atmosphere. Then he saw 2 glasses of red wine, one still full, the other half empty. And then he saw Vanessa. She was leaning against the desk, her loose hair falling over bare shoulders. She wore a red dress Thomas had never seen before, completely unlike her usual corporate style. And in her arms was Nathan, his hands on her waist, their lips locked in a slow, deep kiss, the kind that left no doubt about intimacy and familiarity. The basket slipped from Thomas's hands. The sound of the wicker hitting the floor echoed through the silent hallway like a gunshot. Vanessa pulled away from Nathan so fast she nearly tripped in her heels. Her eyes went wide when she saw Thomas standing in the doorway, holding a wine bottle in one hand, his expression utterly blank. "Thomas," her voice came out as a strangled whisper. What are you doing here?" Nathan had stepped back, nervously running a hand through his hair. He avoided looking directly at Thomas. Thomas walked into the office slowly, as if in a dream. He looked at the candles, the wine, the table clearly set for 2. His eyes locked onto Nathan for a moment, then returned to Vanessa. "What am I doing here?" Thomas repeated her question, his voice eerily calm, eerily controlled. "It's our wedding anniversary, Vanessa. 11 years. I made grilled salmon. You remember? The same one I made on our first date. I thought I'd bring it to you since you're working late." He gestured with the wine bottle toward the scene around them. "But I see you already have wine. And company." Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Tears started welling in her eyes. "Thomas, please, let me explain. This isn't what you think. Isn't what I think." Thomas let out a humorless laugh. "Funny, Vanessa. Because what I think is that my wife is having an affair with the photographer I welcomed into my home. The guy who took pictures at our Christmas party. The guy I thought was a solid professional, someone trustworthy." Nathan took a step forward, hands raised in a calming gesture. Look, man, I know this looks bad, but, you don't talk to me. Thomas cut him off, his voice still dangerously calm. You don't get to talk to me, call me man, or even be in the same room as me. You stay quiet. Nathan stepped back, swallowing hard. Thomas turned his full attention to Vanessa. You know what's really interesting? I found your messages. 3 weeks ago. On our shared computer. You understand me in a way no one else does. Those were your words to him, weren't they? Color drained from Vanessa's face. You were spying on me? Spying? Thomas's voice finally rose slightly. No, Vanessa. I was using our computer to print out class materials. The messages popped up through automatic syncing. That's not spying when you're careless. He took a step toward her, and Vanessa instinctively stepped back. But you know what I did after I found those messages? I thought about all those solo work trips you've taken over the past few months. The conference in Portland. The workshop in Denver. That 4-day event in San Francisco. Thomas turned to Nathan. You were on those trips, weren't you? Of course you were. You were the official event photographer. How convenient. Nathan opened his mouth but no sound came out. Thomas, I can explain, Vanessa tried again, her voice breaking. You don't understand. You're always so tired. Always grading papers, always prepping lectures. You don't see me anymore, don't hear me. I feel invisible. Invisible. Thomas repeated the word as if tasting something bitter. I work because I'm a teacher, Vanessa. I grade papers at night because I have 120 students. I prepare lectures because I care about their education. And you knew that when you married me. You said you admired my dedication. He gestured at the scene around them. But apparently, admiration has an expiration date. So you went looking for someone who'd make you feel seen. Someone with a flexible schedule. Someone who could light candles and play our song while I was at home cooking an anniversary dinner you never intended to eat. Tears streamed freely down Vanessa's face now. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did hurt me, didn't you? Thomas said simply. You hurt me every time you chose to come here instead of coming home. Every time you took his call in another room. Every time you smiled at his messages while I sat in the same room. Nathan, who'd stayed silent, finally spoke, his voice low and guilty. Thomas, we didn't mean for it to be this way. Vanessa was going to tell you. She was just waiting for the right moment. Thomas turned to him with an expression that made Nathan flinch again. The right moment? And when would that have been, Nathan? After you'd spent more money on hotel rooms? After how many more lies? He turned back to Vanessa. By the way, about lies, that feminine health issue 6 months ago. That procedure you had. Your sister went with you, you said. Vanessa went completely pale, her legs seeming to buckle. I called your sister last week, Thomas continued, his voice now dangerously soft. Just casual conversation. Asked how she was, if work was busy. Mentioned how much I admired her for taking time off to go with you that day 6 months ago. Know what she said? Absolute silence filled the room. She said she had no idea what I was talking about. That she didn't go with you for any procedure. Thomas stepped closer to Vanessa. So I'll ask now, and I want an honest answer for the first time in I don't know how many months, was that baby his? Vanessa sobbed, covering her face with her hands. Her silence was answer enough. Nathan looked visibly shocked. Van, you were pregnant? I was, Thomas answered for her, bitterness finally seeping into his voice. But she took care of the problem. Without telling me. Without giving me a say. While I thought I was supporting my wife through a health issue, she was terminating a child that might not even have been mine. Vanessa was now crying uncontrollably, her shoulders shaking. I didn't know what to do. I was scared. I didn't know whose it was and you chose to handle it alone, Thomas finished. You chose to lie. You chose everything except honesty with me. He looked at both of them, Nathan visibly uncomfortable, Vanessa shattered. For a moment, no one spoke. The music still played softly in the background, now utterly inappropriate for the moment. Thomas set the wine bottle he'd been holding on the table next to their glasses. Go ahead and enjoy your dinner. Enjoy the wine. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Vanessa? When you get home tonight, if you even plan to go home, you'll find some documents on the living room table. I got them yesterday from a lawyer. Divorce papers are already being prepared. You'll receive them officially on Monday. Vanessa lifted her head sharply. You already hired a lawyer? 3 weeks ago, Thomas confirmed. Ever since I found the messages. I thought you at least deserved that I'd be certain before ending an 11-year marriage. But you just gave me all the certainty I needed. He looked once more at Nathan. And you, I hope this was worth it. Because Monday morning, I'm calling your photography agency and telling your supervisor about this highly unprofessional relationship with a client. I'm sure they'll love hearing how you mix business with pleasure in such a special way. Nathan paled. You can't, I can and I will, Thomas cut him off. You destroyed my marriage. I'm just making sure there are consequences. Welcome to the real world, Nathan. Thomas rode the elevator down with trembling legs but kept his composure until he reached his car. Only when he locked the doors and sat alone in the darkness of the parking lot did he let the pain truly hit him. He rested his forehead on the steering wheel and let silent, bitter tears fall. The following weeks unfolded like a surreal sequence. Thomas immediately froze their joint bank accounts after the confrontation, protecting his assets. Vanessa called dozens of times, sent long messages begging for forgiveness and pleading to talk. He never replied. He let his lawyers handle all communication. The story leaked through the events industry just as Thomas knew it would, not because of him, he never breathed a word to anyone. But Nathan, under the weight of guilt and fear, told a colleague. That colleague told another. Within days, everyone in the industry knew. Vanessa started losing contracts. Clients no longer wanted to work with someone whose personal life had become gossip fodder. Her reputation, built over years of meticulous work, crumbled within weeks. Nathan called Thomas 2 weeks after the confrontation. Thomas let it go to voicemail but listened to the message later. Nathan's voice sounded broken, desperate. Thomas, I know you don't want to talk to me, but I need you to know. I broke things off with Vanessa. This was a huge mistake. I never wanted to destroy a marriage. I didn't know it'd get this serious. Please don't tell my agency. I'll lose everything. I'm begging you. Thomas deleted the message without replying. 2 days later, he did exactly what he'd promised and called Nathan's photography agency. He presented evidence of the inappropriate client relationship, including dates and locations that coincided with professional events. The agency opened an internal investigation and, a week later, Nathan was fired for violating professional conduct policies. Vanessa showed up at the house one night, 3 weeks after the confrontation. Thomas was grading papers when he heard the doorbell. He opened the door to find her on the step, looking smaller and more fragile than he remembered. Please, she said, her voice hoarse. Please let me in. We need to talk. We don't, Thomas replied calmly. My lawyers are talking to your lawyers. That's enough. I made a terrible mistake, Vanessa continued, ignoring his refusal. I ruined everything. Nathan broke up with me. He said he can't handle the guilt. I'm losing major contracts. My colleagues barely speak to me. Even my own sister is mad at me because you called and she found out about everything. Thomas just looked at her, expressionless. I know you're hurt, Vanessa went on, tears forming again. I know I hurt you more than anyone should ever hurt someone they love. But we can try again. We can go to couples therapy. I can prove I still love you. You still love me, Thomas repeated, the phrase sounding absurd in his ears. Vanessa, you don't love me. Maybe you did once, years ago. But now? You betrayed me for nearly a year. You slept with another man countless times. You got pregnant and had an abortion without consulting me, without giving me the right to know. You lied to me every single day, looked me in the eyes and pretended everything was fine. He paused, letting the words sink in. That's not love, Vanessa. That's selfishness. You made choices that benefited you and you alone. And now that Nathan's discarded you, now that your life is falling apart, you come here talking about love? No. You're here because you're scared. Scared of being alone. Scared of consequences. But I'm not your safety net. Thomas, please, the divorce will be finalized in a few months, he continued. I keep the house because it was bought with family inheritance before we married. You'll get your fair share of what we accumulated together. It's fair. It's civilized. But there will be no reconciliation. No second chance. We're done. He began closing the door, but Vanessa put her hand out to stop it. You can't just erase me from your life after 11 years. I can and I will, Thomas replied firmly. Take care of yourself, Vanessa. He closed the door. He heard her crying on the other side for a few minutes before she finally walked away. Months passed. Thomas threw himself into work, his students, his books. He started attending a support group for divorced men that a fellow teacher had recommended. He met other men with similar stories, some worse than his own. He learned he wasn't alone in his pain. He learned that healing was possible, but it took time. One day, 6 months after that night in the office, Thomas decided to try something new. He signed up for a holistic wellness workshop that a colleague had mentioned. He'd never been into meditation or yoga, but he was open to new things. It was part of rebuilding. That's where he met Elena. She was the meditation instructor, a librarian who led weekend workshops. She had a gentle smile and talked about books with a passion Thomas recognized in himself. They started chatting after the session about favorite authors. They discovered they both loved historical fiction, especially novels set during World War II. Thomas hadn't been looking for a relationship. He hadn't expected one. But Elena was easy to talk to. She didn't pressure him or ask invasive questions about his past. She just existed beside him, comfortably and naturally. They began having coffee together after the workshops. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners turned into Sunday walks in the park. Elena knew he was divorced. Thomas had been upfront from the start. She'd never married herself, but she had her own stories of relationships that hadn't worked out. There was no judgment between them, just mutual understanding. It was on a Saturday afternoon, 9 months after the separation, that Thomas ran into Vanessa again. He was at the grocery store with Elena, picking out ingredients for dinner they'd cook together. Thomas was laughing at something Elena had said when he turned the corner in the wine aisle and nearly bumped into Vanessa. She was alone, pushing a nearly empty cart. Her face was thinner, dark circles under her eyes. Her hair, once always perfectly styled, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore casual clothes, not the sophisticated style she used to favor. Thomas, she said, surprise clear in her voice. Vanessa, he replied with polite neutrality. Her eyes shifted to Elena, who'd stopped beside Thomas, one hand resting lightly on his arm in a natural, intimate gesture. Hi, Elena said with her gentle smile, extending her hand. I'm Elena. Vanessa automatically shook her hand, but her eyes stayed locked on Thomas. You two are, together, yes, Thomas finished simply. Elena, this is Vanessa, my ex-wife. The word ex hung in the air between them, definitive and final. It's nice to meet you, Elena said, with no hint of discomfort. Thomas admired that about her, the ease with which she navigated potentially tense situations with grace. Vanessa looked between them, something breaking in her expression. You're okay, she said to Thomas, and it wasn't a question. It was a realization heavy with weight and sadness. You're really okay. I am, Thomas confirmed, and it was true. He was okay. Not in the way she likely expected, not alone and still bitter. He'd genuinely moved on. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. For everything. I ruined the best thing I ever had. Thomas felt no anger hearing those words. No satisfaction. Just indifference. And maybe, deep down, a touch of pity. I hope you find what you're looking for, Vanessa. Truly. He didn't wait for a reply. He simply nodded slightly and kept walking down the aisle with Elena beside him. He didn't look back. He didn't feel the need to. You okay? Elena asked softly once they'd gone a few aisles over. Thomas considered the question. He thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the pain, the sleepless nights, the divorce process, the slow, hard rebuilding of his life and self-worth. He thought about what it felt like to be beside someone who valued him, who shared his interests, who chose to be with him every day not out of obligation or history, but genuine desire. Yes, he replied, and realized it was completely honest. I'm okay. That night, as they cooked together in Thomas's kitchen, the same kitchen where he'd prepared that anniversary dinner that was never served, he realized he'd made it to the other side. The pain was still there, probably always would be to some degree, but it no longer defined him. He'd built something new. Something honest. Something worth keeping. Elena was laughing as she tried to flip an omelette without breaking it, focused and determined. Thomas watched her for a moment, then went back to chopping vegetables for the salad, a small smile touching his lips. He'd survived. More than that, he'd grown. And that, he realized, was the best revenge of all. Not destroying the person who hurt him, but simply becoming someone better, someone happier, someone who no longer needed anything from that past. Life went on. And for the first time in a long while, Thomas was genuinely excited to see what came next. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.